In this video, I'm creating a delicious Petit Gateau, which has all my favorite flavors. It's got chocolate, vanilla, a touch of orange, and most importantly, it's got a variance in texture. We're going to start with what we call a chocolate pain de gêne, also known as a chocolate cake. It's really moist because it's made with a marzipan base and it has egg yolks in there. It's one of my favorite cakes to make. It is gluten-free, but the layer we put on top does contain rice bubbles that do contain gluten. So if you want the whole Petit Gateau to be gluten-free, you can interchange the rice bubbles for something that is gluten-free of the same weight. We're going to start by placing the marzipan into the mixer with a paddle attachment. Now this marzipan is 50%. That means we've got equal quantity of both almonds and sugar. You can get some marzipans as low as 30%. The percentage is always indicative of the amount of nuts. I'm going to break that up. Because this doesn't contain any water, when we add ingredients that contain water, such as eggs, we have to add them very slowly to ensure we don't get any lumps. Going to add in some caster sugar. I'm just going to mix those two slightly before starting to add in the eggs and the egg yolks. As I said, we're going to add them in very slowly, scraping down after each application of egg to ensure that we've got no marzipan on the side of the bowl that hasn't been incorporated. Before continuing on to add the remaining egg, I'm going to add in some orange zest. I'm just going to break up the remaining egg before adding it in, so it's easier to control how much I add. You don't want to aerate this mixture, we just keep it on quite a low to medium speed while we're incorporating all of the ingredients. Next, we're adding the salt now that all the egg is incorporated. Now the remaining ingredients I'm going to fold through by hand. Next, we're going to add in some cocoa powder. Now I'm using a Dutch processed cocoa powder, which is really easy to incorporate into liquids because it's had alkaline added to it. It's also a richer red dark color because the alkaline has been added. Also going to add in some baking powder. Going to fold those through. Now I've melted the unsalted butter. I'm going to take a small amount of the mixture and add it into the butter. Mix that together before adding it back in. That way the butter's not going to run to the base of the bowl and it's going to incorporate really easily. Going to fold through the butter. Now you can spread this out into a tray lined with baking paper. I'm going to spread this out into what we call a flexi pat, which is a flexible silicone mat. It's like a baking tray with sides on it. Just spread it out evenly. As you're spreading the mixture, just angle the palette knife slightly. Now I'm going to bake this at 160 degrees Celsius for approximately 15 minutes. When you touch the pain de gêne, it should just bounce back slightly. Now while the pain de gêne is baking, I'm going to prepare our insert, which is a vanilla cream insert. It's an anglaise, which is a light custard base, which we're actually going to set with both the egg yolks and some pre-soaked gelatin. So I'm going to place some gelatin in the bowl to start. Make sure your bowl of water is quite cool. Now in the saucepan, I'm going to place some cream. Try if you can to use 35% fat cream. If you can't, if it's a lower percentage of fat, you can increase the egg yolk slightly. You can either use cut and scrape vanilla bean or some vanilla bean paste, and we're going to place that into the cream. In a bowl, we're going to make the base for the anglaise, which is a combination of sugar and egg yolks. We're going to whisk those two together. Doesn't need to be aerated, but it does need to be well combined. Now I'm going to boil the cream. Once it comes to a boil, I'm going to pour it over the egg yolk mixture and mix it together. It's important that we don't place the eggs into the saucepan because it's too hot initially. So we pour the liquid into the eggs before placing it back into the saucepan. We're going to stir it gently on a low heat until it reaches 80 degrees Celsius. Then we're going to strain it immediately into a bowl. We're just going to pour that into the egg yolk mixture, just stirring it in between. Once we mix that together, we're going to place it back into the saucepan. And then we change to a spatula. We don't use a whisk at this stage because it can create a foam on top of the anglaise, which we don't want. So I'm going to turn it back on a low heat and I'm going to stir it continuously until it comes to 80 degrees. Then I'm going to add the gelatin and strain it immediately. Induction, which is what I'm using, heats from the base and it is really fast. Gas may take a little bit longer and you have to be careful with gas that the flame's not too high so it's not cooking too much on the top or the edge of the saucepan. I'm going to add in now the pre-soaked gelatin. Just squeeze out any excess water. I'm going to mix that in, which one helps cool the anglaise down so it doesn't overcook, and it's easy to add it at this stage so we don't have to melt the gelatin separately. We're going to strain that to eliminate any cooked egg, especially with induction, that you get on the bottom of the saucepan. You can see that cooked egg there. So we want to ensure that we strain that so it doesn't go through to the anglaise. Now you can pour this into your mold with a jug. You can use a small ladle. What I'm using is a depositor. You could also use a disposable piping bag if you wanted to and cut a very small amount off the end. I'm going to pour this into the depositor. Now I'm using a silicone mold, which is going to freeze, unmold, and then become the insert in the middle of the mousse. If you haven't got a silicone mold, you can simply make this into a lined tray. So line it with plastic wrap, freeze it, then cut it into individual shapes. I'm now going to place these in the freezer. In the blast freezer, these will take about 30 minutes. In a standard freezer, up to 2 to 3 hours to solidly freeze them before unmolding them. You can store them in this mold in the freezer until you're ready to assemble your Petit Gateau for approximately 6 weeks in a domestic freezer and about 3 months in a commercial freezer. If you enjoyed that episode, you will love my channel. Subscribe today for even more tutorials on chocolate and baking. Best of all, it's free, so get on it.